This video is intended to give you a somewhat abbreviated look at my Pixinsight workflow. I'll be going over my image pre-processing and integration workflow, as well as my basic editing steps within Pixinsight. This is by no means intended to be a full, in-depth tutorial. I should also note that this is the process I use. There are as many opinions on how to process images as there are people processing images. This is just the method that works best for me. Of course, I didn't figure this all out by myself. There are many fantastic resources on the web. The tutorials on lightvortexastronomy.com were particularly helpful to me and are worth a look if you're just getting into Pixinsight processing. There are some things I won't be going over in this tutorial that many people consider essential to getting good images. Things like taking and integrating calibration frames, called flats, darks, and bias frames. These are frames that are meant to counteract certain tendencies in your image train. Things like hot pixels, signal noise, vignetting, dust motes. While I do use these calibration frames in my processing, I won't be covering these aspects of the process in any detail. Any number of things can happen during an imaging session to ruin an image. Dew or clouds can obscure our target. Wind or mount tracking errors can ruin an image as well. Since processing images takes time, it's best to eliminate any of these bad images from the get-go. We can do this using Blink. Underneath Process, Image Inspection, we find Blink. Blink is a neat tool to allow us to inspect our images one after another to see if we have any outliers that we'd like to get rid of. For this tutorial, we'll be working with a bunch of subframes that I took of Andromeda the other night. So the first thing we need to do is load those images into Blink. So we'll navigate to where those images are stored, and we'll load those in. I have converted I shoot a Nikon D610, and I have converted my raw images to this XISF format that Pixinsight likes to use. And I'll open that up. We'll load those images in. Now that the images are loaded up, we can take a look at them. We have this little preview screen that's opened up, and the first image is highlighted, so we can take a look at this image. We can zoom in by scrolling the mouse wheel in and out, and we can take a look to see how round our stars are. We can see if we've got good detail in here. We can also get an overall look at the image to see if we got a good signal to noise ratio, if there's any star trails from poor tracking or from a bump of the mount from wind or from an individual. And what I can do is just highlight these images and just scroll down through them and look at each image. We can see here the image is moving. That is because I was using dithering. My auto guider would automatically, in between frames, would move the scope just a few pixels in a random direction. And this is used to counteract noise that's inherent in DSLR cameras, so it's particularly useful there. As I look down, I'm seeing all the images fairly good. We can see the change in brightness. This is probably due to high wispy clouds, a car driving by, who knows. As we go down, we can see another image like that. This looks like the exposure is just off altogether. I'm not sure what happened there. This is a big jump. This looks like the new imaging day. These images span a couple days. Anyway, we can go through them here. We can decide which images we like, which images we don't like, and we can output them to a directory. We can see we've got some planes flew through the frame here. Once we decided which images we want to use and which we don't want to use, we can just uncheck the images we don't want to use here. And then we can use this button here to output those images to a new directory. If I don't have any really bad images, if I don't have any images that have some streaked stars, I tend to use as many images as I can and let Pixinsight's other processes weed out the bad ones. I'll be using a process later on called Subframe Selector that would allow me to analyze things like star roundness, focus, tracking errors, signal to noise ratios, and give me a good criterion on which images I should use and which images I shouldn't use. I could also just choose to use all the images and just assign weights to them based on the quality of the images. And we'll go over that later. So for now, I'm just gonna use all these images. They all look good enough to me. I'm just gonna close out Blink. And I'm gonna go on to step 2. Step 2 is image calibration. And before we align and stack our images, we need to calibrate them. And this basically entails subtracting the artifacts found in our master flat, bias, and dark from our light frames. Underneath process, image calibration, image calibration. Let's clear this tool so that we don't have any old stuff there. We'll add our files. Like I said, I'm choosing to use all the files here because I didn't see anything that I couldn't deal with in Subframe Selector. So I'm just going to add all these files here, and I'm going to open them. I'm going to choose an output directory, calibrated. This is a directory that I pre-created. We're going to use our master bias frame here. We're going to use the master dark that I have in my collection for the same ISO. Again, I don't go over this stuff, but this is important stuff to know if you're going to be doing serious astrophotography. I did not take any flats for this imaging session. Vignetting I can deal with in post. I generally clean off my image sensor. I still end up getting dust motes, debris on the lens from trees blowing in the wind or whatever. So, you take your chances when you don't take flats. I'm not taking them here. But once I've got all that ready to go, I'll just hit this round button here, which means apply global, and I'll let it do its thing. Okay, now that my image calibration is complete, it's time to move on to the next step, and that's cosmetic correction. Cosmetic correction allows us to examine our image and remove any hot and cold pixels that we have in the image. Hot and cold pixels are basically saturated pixels on the sensor that will show up as a bright white speck, or completely dead pixels, which will show up as black specks. Process. All process is cosmetic correction. Here it is. We'll load up our frames from our newly calibrated frames. We'll give them an output directory, which will be cosmetically corrected. We will load in our master dark here. And what we're going to do here is we're going to open up an image. We're going to stretch the image. This icon up here with the screen that shows the radioactivity symbol, this stretches the image. Now we can see a little bit more detail. We'll zoom in on the area here, and we'll see if we can't find any hot pixels. Now, as I zoom in, I see these pixels here, like this, here, here, here's some other ones. Those may or may not be star data. Here's a couple that look like hot pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a preview of this area here where I think I see hot pixels. This little icon up here is how you create a new preview. Then you can drag it across the image, and then you can take a look just at the preview. Now, the reason why I did this is because now here in cosmetic correction, I'm going to open up a real-time preview with this hollow circle, this ring here. This will allow me to make changes to these settings and see how they affect the overall image. Okay, so I'm going to enable my hot pixel threshold. I'm going to keep an eye on these hot pixels that I see here, and I'm just going to bring this sigma value down. As I bring that down, you'll start to see those hot pixels start to disappear. They'll start to pop away. Now, too much, and you're going to be removing too much data from your images. So I will just enough until it looks like it's cleaning up the majority of them. Right about there for me, okay? So this is what I'm going to stick with, sigma of 1.28. Now that I'm pretty much satisfied with the way that looks, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to highlight the main image here, and I'm just going to tell this to apply this globally here. Or I could just grab this onto here. That will, if I drag this onto this image here, it will only apply to this one image. So I'm going to apply this globally to all these images. I can just close this preview here. Cosmetic Correction, apply globally, and here we go. That'll take some time. Once Cosmetic Correction is complete, we can start to get ready to align and integrate our images. But first we're going to have to do a couple things. Because I took these images with a DSLR camera, I'm going to need to run a process called Debaying. Now, the way color CCD sensors and color CMOS sensors work is they're basically monochromatic sensors with color filters on top of them. The color filters are usually consisting of red, green, and blue filters, and they are organized in any number of configurations. That configuration is called a mosaic pattern. In order to be able to debayer your images, you're going to need to know what mosaic pattern your sensor uses. What can happen is, and this happened to me the first time that I processed a DSLR image, I didn't debayer. And at the end of my imaging integration, I noticed there was no color in my image. It was completely monochrome. And that's why, because I didn't debayer. So it's an important step to do if you have, if you shot with a DSLR or any color sensor. Okay, so so we're gonna run a script called batch debayer. We can find that under script, execute script file, and batch debayer. We can open up the batch debayer script here. We can add our images. Now we've already calibrated our images. We've cosmetically corrected them. So we'll select those cosmetically corrected images for debayering. We'll open all those. This is where you choose your debayering method. Usually for DSLR, it's going to be VNG. I'm not going to get into too much detail on the differences between superpixel, bilinear, or VNG. Let's just use VNG. And this is where we select our mosaic pattern that's unique to your sensor. RGGB is what Nikon and what Canon use. So we'll be using RGGB. We'll also tell it an output directory. That will be debayer. Once we're ready to go, we can execute the debayer script. Now that debayering is done, we can use another image inspection tool to help us better know what our images look like from an integration standpoint. If we open up script batch processing subframe selector, this is a tool that will allow us to do that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all my old images. I'm going to add the images that we just debayered here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my system parameters. System parameters are unique to your imaging train. Subframe scale. This is going to be a tricky one for you to figure out. The best way to do it is to upload a single image to www.astronomy.net and let it figure out the subframe scale for you. Okay? Camera gain. This is another thing. The EDU number. You're going to have to get this from the manufacturer's specifications. Okay? Depending on the sensor that you're using. Camera resolution. Technically, I've got a 14-bit camera here. I'm running a Nikon DSLR. You can keep it at 16-bit, that's fine. Scale unit, data number, these can all remain the same for this particular one. Star detection and fitting, these work just fine, and these are the defaults. Okay. Expressions. This is a tool that can allow you to use a mathematical formula to either approve or reject images. I don't do that. I don't do that because I'd rather just apply a weight to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this little expression here to weight the images. And basically I'm going to take twice the signal to noise ratio weight, and I'm going to subtract, this is the full width half maximum. This is a algebraic or Fourier, I guess technically, equation that basically means how round and how tight the stars are. Smaller stars compared, if you have two frames, the same star is bigger in one frame than it is on the other frame, we know that the focus may be a little bit out, or the tracking or something was a little bit out on the frame where the star is bigger as opposed to where the star is smaller. So basically I subtract the size of the star from twice the signal to noise ratio weight, and that's how I weight my images. And with this image weighting, each image is going to have a percentage of overall effect on the final images when we stack them and integrate them. The better images will have a greater influence on the overall image than the weaker, lower weighted images. Okay? This allows me to keep as many images as possible, so I have as much data as possible, but I make sure that my best images are having more of an influence on the overall image as the lower weighted ones. What we do is once we select this, we can just have this measure. This is going to take a while. When we come back, we'll go over the second part of this. Okay, that took a while. Subframe Selector has done its magic. It's measured all the images, and what it's going to do is it's going to give us this table, and it's also going to give us a plot output. So let's see. It looks like I imaged these over a course of a couple days. It looks like if I'm just to look at the full width half maximum of the on average of all the stars in the image, I can see I've got a bunch of really tight stars here below 2.5, and then I've got another set that's up over 5. I've got another set here that was around 5.5. I've got these sets here. These are all around a little bit over 3. So what I can do is I can choose to eliminate some of these images from the overall integration so that I'm not having poorly focused or poorly tracked images included as part of my integration, my final integration image. I also see here table. This is right now sorted by weight in a descending order. So my number 1 weighted image is at the top, and my lowest weighted image, based on the calculation that I gave here, is at the bottom. This image here is going to be my reference image for some upcoming processes that we're going to run, specifically local normalization, star registration, and image integration finally. Are all going to be asked for a reference image, and we need to pick one of these images as a reference image. So we'll make a note of which image we want to have as a reference image. Here we can see it's 8-26-41 is going to be our reference image. So we'll make a note of that. I also think that maybe these outliers here at least shouldn't be included as part of the total integration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just click on these images here to remove them from the overall integration process. And what will happen is once we reject these images, once I've chosen which images to reject, which is going to be these images here because they're outliers pretty much from the rest, which stand at about, well, this set here of data is exceptional. This is just a little less exceptional. These are not that fantastic, but I'm going to keep them because I want as much data as possible. Galaxies are faint, and if we get too picky, we're going to end up with less data, and that's not going to be good. So I'm rejecting these images here. For my output, I need a way to know what weights were assigned to what images in later processes. And like I said before, the higher weighted images, we want to have a greater overall effect on the final image as the lower weighted images. So what we need to do here is, first of all, let's pick our directories where we want things to go. We want our approved directory to go here. Our files that are approved, we want them to go here. Our rejected files will go in a directory called rejected. Okay, and our star map directory will go. It's the same thing. Like I said before, I create these directories ahead of time so that I don't forget any steps. Select folders. Now down here, weight keyword. Basically, XISF format is an extended version of the FITS format that's been sort of deprecated in Pixinsight. That was the go-to. But what it does is basically this adds a FITS header to our XISF image. All of our images have a FITS header, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a FITS header that includes the weight of the image so that we can use that for later processing. So you use a keyword here. I use SS weight as my keyword. Okay, so SS weight keyword with the weight will be added. They'll be added to the FITS header of all the images. This is just data that's it basically goes along with any image. Headers are just basically data that goes along with any image. You don't see it in the image, but if you're actually to examine, have a tool to examine the image headers, you can see that. Anyway, so it looks like we're ready to go with the subframe selectors. We've got all our images here. We've got our weights assigned. We've got our output directory assigned. We have rejected some images here. So we are ready to go. Anyway, so it looks like we're ready to go with the subframe selectors. We've got all our images here. We've got our weights assigned. We've got our output directory assigned. We have rejected some images here. So we are ready to go. All right, output subframes. And this will take a while. And once this is done, we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, now that subframe selection is complete, we're ready for image registration. So we're going to use image registration basically to align our images based on the star field. And that'll just take each image and just align the next image on top of it so that they're all perfectly aligned, so that when we integrate them, we don't have any double stars or anything like that. The first thing we can do is we can go to Process, Image Registration, Star Alignment. Open that tool up. And we'll pick that reference image. Remember we talked about that reference image that we noted from our subframe selector? We're going to use that this is the first place we're going to need to use that reference image. And we'll just pick that reference image out of all of our, and that is it right there. We'll open that up. Distortion model, we'll use none. Projective transformation is fine. As a matter of fact, all the defaults here are fine. I'm going to want to generate drizzle data because I am going to be doing a drizzle integration towards the end. We'll talk more about that later. I'm going to add my target images from my approved directory here. And I'm going to choose the output directory, registered. Our star detection and our star matching algorithms. These are the defaults and these work just fine. If you're finding that you're not able to find any stars to match for whatever reason, you can improve, you can raise your you can lower your tolerance, raise your tolerance, increase your ransack iterations. But in general, for good images, these settings work decently. All right, so once we're ready to go with the star alignment process, we can just go ahead and apply this globally. Now that our image registration is complete and our images have been aligned, we're going to do another step that is meant to improve image quality. Once again, local normalization is a new tool to Pixinsight, and it's said to feature a better pixel rejection algorithm, and it's supposed to result in a smoother and less noisy image. I'm not entirely convinced that it does this for my images so far, but I run it anyway because it's supposed to, and I don't have enough image processing sessions under my belt with the tool to make a final say, and it's worthwhile for the purposes of the tutorial. Oh, we'll close this process, all process, local normalization right here. We will again choose that same reference image from our registered directory this time, and it was 82641. There it is. These defaults work fine. Okay, so you can raise this scale if you want to 256. That's a judgment call. There's not a lot of information. There is some information saying that it does help, but there's not, overall, there's not a lot of information. We'll just leave it at 128 for this time. We'll add our target images from the registered directory. We will choose an output directory, normalized, and we're ready to go. Now that our local normalization is complete, we can finally get onto our image integration. Process, image integration, image integration. Okay, here we'll add our light files from the registered directory. These are our line files. We'll add our locally normalized files that were created during the localized normalization process under normalized. And then we'll add our Drizzle files, which should be under the registered directory. And we'll just add those. It'll automatically show us which ones those are, and we'll add them. Okay. Okay, once our files are added, we're going to go down here to image integration. Now, for the most part, these defaults work fine. We're going to check generate Drizzle data so that because we are going to do a Drizzle integration at the end of this, and we'll talk more about that during that time. Pixel rejection algorithms. For images, say greater than 15, we have 100, no, I think we have 100 and some images here, but anyway, if we have more than, say, 15 images, we should use linear fit clipping. And there's a whole bunch of information on the web. You can, when you start processing your own images, you can find out which ones will work best for your data here by following some of those tutorials that are online. Just give it a Google. For our second pixel rejection algorithm, for the size of the images we have, these will work fine. So we'll leave those alone. Let's see. Large scale pixel rejection, no. Reason of interest, no. We're good there. So I think this is going to be a good start for us to immigrate our image. So let's go ahead and apply this globally. All right, now that our image integration is complete, we have these images open up. They're the only one we care about. This is a rejection low. These are the images that were rejected by the low pixel rejection algorithm. This is an artifact of the pixel rejection linear fit clipping. This will give you the range of pixels that were rejected. And then the slope rejection high image will show us the hot pixels that were rejected by the algorithm. And then this is your final integration image here. All right. Now, it looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in here and take a look at the image. It looks all right. what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens when we do a drizzle integration, and we'll compare the two images. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close this image integration window. I'm going to open up processes, image integration, and drizzle integration. Here we're going to add the drizzle images that were created by our last process here. Open. And we are going to, you can choose a scale of either 1 or 2. I'm going to choose 2 for this image. It'll create a larger file. You know, it really is up to you. And we're going to run this and we're going to compare the two. All right? So let's do this and we'll be back when this is done. Okay, now that our drizzle integration is complete, let's stretch this image and let's take a look at the differences. Okay, between the two images. Now, if I zoom in on the galaxy here onto one of these stars, say let's zoom in on this star here next to the core of the galaxy, and then we'll also zoom in on the same star here next to the core of the galaxy. We'll notice something. You see how much more blocky the star is over here than it is over here? As we zoom in on this image, we see that this image looks like it's composed of, or in this image, it looks like it's composed of many more pixels than this image. And that's what drizzle integration gets you. It interpolates the data between the pixels and creates new pixels to give you a larger image and give you smoother transitions in between the pixels. So it makes a significant difference on image quality. We're going to use the drizzle integrated version of the image, and we're going to close the initial version. The first thing we're going to do, since this image is so long, it can be a little bit unwieldy to work with. So we're going to just crop this down. I'm going to go to the process, geometry, and dynamic crop. And we're just going to crop this image so that we're just taking the galaxy, just like that. We'll check mark. All right, now that we've got a little smaller image to work with here, we can close the dynamic crop tool and we can start our image processing flow. I have a default project that I keep, and basically it has the tools that I use in my process from the beginning to end so that I know where they are and they're easy to reach. And this is basically from beginning to end my imaging process workflow. I start by removing the background. So we'll open up Automatic Background Extractor. We'll click on the image. And let's see, the first thing we want to do, these are usually pretty good. We want to make sure that we choose the target image correction as subtraction. If it's none, you'll run this, it'll remove the background, then it'll just have a background image. It won't give you a new image with the background removed. So we'll choose subtraction here. We'll drag this triangle onto our image, and this will do it for us. All right, now we're gonna have two images. We're gonna have the background image. If we stretch this, we can see it's good. This is the background that it removed from our image, and then we'll have a new integration image. We'll stretch this one. All right, and that's what our image looks like with the background removed. We can go here and we can minimize this drizzle integration because we'll work mainly with this one from here on out. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to want to neutralize the background. So we're going to open up background neutralization. We're going to grab a preview of the background that is just a blank background with no stars in there. We're going to try to find one. We'll create a new preview. Remember, this is the button that creates a preview. And we're just going to grab this part of the background that has very few stars. This right here looks like it'll do the trick. All right. We're just going to tell this to use that preview that we just created. And then we're going to drag this on top of the image. All right, looks a little bit greener, but that's okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the color calibration tool. For our background image, we're going to use the same reference, the same preview that we had set before. And we're going to create a white reference preview. I'll create a new preview tool here. We'll zoom in on the center of the galaxy here, the whitemost part of the galaxy, and I'll just create a preview there, and then we'll just tell it to use that second preview here. All right, and we will drag that triangle onto the image to apply the changes. All right, and that looks pretty good. So the next step is going to be to stretch this image for real. Right now we're just using these preview modes that are just basically Pixinsight's sort of stretch so we can work with the image, but we want to actually make a change to this image's histogram to permanently apply any changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to just grab the histogram transformation tool. We're going to reset it. We're going to grab the screen transfer function, and what we can do, we can get rid of this stretch by clicking this reset screen transfer functions button. We'll remove the stretch, and then we can apply the screen stretch again using this function here by dragging. You can just hit this radioactive button. All right, great. And now what we can do is we can remove the screen transfer function from this preview and grab the same settings and move it over here to our histogram transformation tool. Now we can use this tool to make actual stretches to our image, but we've got a nice head start by using the screen transfer function. We can see that if we open up the real-time preview, and there it is. And as we start to make changes to the histogram here, we can see the changes reflected in our image. What we want to do is we want to have a nice contrast, but we don't want to lose too much data, especially around the edges of the galaxy, these faint edges of the galaxy. We want to keep those. So we can play with this until we think we have a fairly good representation of what we want to see in our image. To me, that looks really good. So I am going to close this preview window, and I'm going to drag this histogram change onto the image. All right. The next step is we want to start bringing out some of the fine detail in the galaxy's arms. We got some really good data here. We've got some really good detail, but we can probably do a little bit better. So what I want to do is I want to open my range selection tool, and for the next changes that we make, I only want to apply it to the galaxy itself. Let's open up the preview. Let's take a look at our range selection. That looks actually pretty good. I'm going to remove the preview, close the window, and then I'm going to drag this onto the image itself. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to create a mask for us. We can then take this mask and we can apply it to the image by dragging it over onto it like so. And we can now see the mask and how it works on the image. So we can see that any changes we make are going to happen only to the galaxy and not to the rest of the stars in the background. Now, if we don't want to see that mask, we can go up to mask and say click the show mask button, and it'll go away. But it's still there, we just can't see it. And we'll open up the HDR transform tool. What this does is it helps increase the dynamic range of the image. We can bring out more detail by doing it. So basically, we can hit reset, go to the defaults, and start going from there. I'm going to use deringing, which will prevent sharp contrast. Rings can happen around your stars. We can have sharp contrast fallout, and that doesn't look natural. So let's bring this onto the image and see what our default looks like. All right, now that that's completed, I can see that I have in fact brought out some detail on the innermost part of the galaxy, but I'm not quite sure I like how it's blown out the very core, how it's sort of blown out the very core of the galaxy. Not really blown out, but it doesn't look natural. It looks like it's gone too far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase my layers to 10. And then I'm going to bring my mid-tones balance down a little bit. I'm going to bring it down to about 25.25. I'm going to hit undo here. And then I'm going to give it another try. Oh, well, that just does not look good at all, does it? Well, we've really screwed the pooch here. Let's just undo this again. Let's bring our midtones balance even further. Let's bring it down to like 0.07. And then let's give it another try. Ah, now that looks a little bit better. Let me just do a before and after. Before. Let's zoom in a little bit. And then after. Yeah, I like that. I like that better. And increase some of the contrast in through here. Alright, well, that's good. So we've got that part done. We can close our HDR multi-scale transform tool. And the next thing we'll do is we can open up this local histogram equalization. And this is another contrast tool. We can open up our preview window here, and we can take a look at the effect of whatever changes we want to do we're going to have on our galaxy. So let's see. I'm going to bring down the contrast limit to 2.5. Let it do its work, and let's see what kind of changes that makes to it. Doesn't seem to change too much. Bring our coronal radius up a little bit more, maybe even a little bit more. We're getting some good detail there. Let me just make some drastic adjustments so we can see what we're really doing here. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go with that for now. Let's get rid of our preview. And let's drag this and bring it onto the image itself. All right, what we can do is we can do a before and after. Just to give us a little idea, a little better idea of what we're doing. We're just increasing that local contrast, and again, bringing out the details in the galaxy. All right, now that those adjustments have been made, we can enhance our deep sky object by reducing the appearance of the stars. I'm going to remove the mask that's on there now. I'm actually going to create a star mask by using the star mask tool here. I just grab the star mask tool here. The defaults usually work pretty well. Just drag this on top of the image, and that will create a star mask for us. All right, here's our star mask. We'll just take that star mask like we did before and grab it and drag it on top of the image we're working on. We can see by this reddish tint of the tab that it is now got a mask applied. We can actually look at the mask by hitting show mask. It's distracting, so I'm going to turn it off. And then we're going to apply something called morphological transformation. That's basically going to reduce the size of our stars, and it's also going to make them a little bit rounder. These are the settings that I use here. We can decrease or increase the amount of elements that we use to make this transformation. I find that the 5 elements is a good, 5 or 7 elements is a good starting point. I go with 5 elements one by one. You can actually start with a different shape here. There's different shapes we can use. And we'll just use this circular shape here for our stars. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to apply it to our image. And now we can see the before and after. Okay, we could even run that again if we wanted to, just to make the galaxies stand out a little bit more. All right, now that that's done, we're going to start having to bring some of the colors out here. So what we'll do is we'll remove our mask. And now I'm going to take the range mask and reapply it, because I just want to make these changes to the galaxy at first and not to the rest. All right, we're going to open up the curves transformation tool. I'm going to reset it by hitting this button down here in the corner. All right, I'm going to open up a real-time preview so I can see these changes as I make it. And then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to start with saturation. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to really boost the saturation up. I'm going to bring up the saturation to somewhere about there. Just about there. All right. I'm going to take the hue and I'm going to move that around until I get a little bit more natural look. And that looks more natural to me for a galaxy. We can grab lightness and we can either bring that down or boost that up. Bring that down or bring it up to make the galaxy stand out a bit more. So I'm just going to bring it up just a hair, about the same amount as I brought our hue up. All right. And I'm going to close this preview window, and then I'm going to drag this and apply it onto the image. Okay, the next part is to bring out the color in the stars that are surrounding it. So I'm going to remove this mask, and I'm going to open up the star mask again, and I'm going to reapply it to the image. And then I'm going to reset this tool, open up the preview window, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit the saturation. I'm going to start bringing up the saturation. Now the first thing I notice is that while I am bringing out some color in the stars, I am also bringing out this purple fringing that can be attributed to chromatic aberration in my lens. When lenses bend light, they don't bend all frequencies of light the same. And this causes fringing. Depending on the lens and the coatings, you can get green or purple fringing. And it looks like I've got some purple fringing, so that's okay. I'll bring my hue down and I'll just drop that a little bit. And that should take care of a lot of that purple fringing. And it has, it's taken care of a fair amount. Also, go to my vibrance element and drop that a little bit too. All right. And now that I've dropped that, I'm fairly happy with the image. I can hit close the preview window, and I can hit this triangle button and drag it onto the image. With the star mask still applied, I'm going to actually open up my color saturation tool, and I'm actually going to bring down that purple a little bit more. I'm going to open up my preview window, and then I can see my purple is in and around here. So I'm going to start my curve there. And this will drop down the saturation for the purple colors here, which improves the image even more. And I'm gonna apply that to the image as well. All right, with that finished, I'm gonna remove our mask. And then the final touch for this one in Pixinsight is gonna be a little bit of noise reduction. Pixinsight's noise reduction tools are actually outstanding. So we're gonna open up the ACDNR tool, and we're gonna open up a preview. We can get a look at what these settings here, what effect these settings here are gonna have on our final image. We can compare the integrated image to the image here. Now this preview quality is not going to be as high as when we actually run the tool, but it'll give you a fairly good idea. And I actually am pretty happy with the default settings usually, and because I will probably apply some more noise reduction in the post-processing steps I do in Lightroom or Photoshop afterwards. But I think for now, I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm going to close this preview, grab the triangle, and drag it onto my image. All right, and now that that is done, we can zoom in on the image to a particularly noisy part, let's say right around in here. And we can do it a before and after. So let's back it off. And then let's go forward, and you can see it's reduced that noise just a little bit, but it's actually a little bit better than it was before. So, all right, so this is about as far as I'm gonna go with this image in Pixinsight. I'll pick up our editing in Photoshop or in Lightroom in another video. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been helpful to you. I know it's been long, but if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll be sure to try to follow up with them when I can. And of course, as always, thank you for tuning in.